A city by the sea. Steel, smoke, industry. Mariupol was not supposed to become a symbol, but it did. When the war expanded in 2022, this port city on the Sea of Azov turned into one of the most intense urban battlefields in modern Europe. Streets collapsed, power grids failed, communication went silent. And inside the ruins, tens of thousands of civilians were trapped. This was not just a battle for territory. It was a battle for access, for supply lines, for the land bridge to Crimea. And beneath the shattered skyline stood Azovstal, a Soviet-era steel fortress that became the last redoubt, the final holdout, the global headline. Mariupol did not fall in a single day. It eroded, block by block, under siege, under artillery, under isolation. Civilians evacuated through fragile corridors. Others stayed. Some could not leave. Estimates of casualties remained contested. The destruction undeniable. When the city finally changed hands, the map of the war changed with it. But that was not the end of Mariupol's story. It was the beginning of a new phase: reconstruction, political consolidation, demographic shifts, and a strategic coastline redrawn. Mariupol is no longer just a battlefield. It is a case study in siege warfare, in urban collapse, in geopolitical consequence. Tonight, we break it down, step by step, from the first encirclement to the final surrender, to the rebuilding of a city that still sits at the center of a global conflict. Before the siege, before the headlines, Mariupol was a strategic equation. Look at the map. Mariupol sits on the northern coast of the Sea of Azov, a port city, an industrial hub, a gateway. Control Mariupol, and you control maritime access. Control Mariupol, and you secure a land corridor linking mainland Russia to Crimea. That corridor was not symbolic. It was logistical, fuel, ammunition, reinforcements. Everything moves easier across connected territory. Before 2022, Mariupol was also one of Ukraine's industrial pillars. Steel plants, heavy manufacturing, export routes. Azovstal and Ilich Iron and Steel Works were not just factories. They were economic engines. Whoever held Mariupol influenced. Trade flows in the Sea of Azov military supply chains in southern Ukraine pressure on Donetsk region's strategic depth toward Crimea. This is why the city was never peripheral. It was central. When the broader war escalated, Mariupol became a primary objective almost immediately. Encirclement began early. Supply lines were cut. Airstrikes intensified. The logic was clear. Secure the coast, close the gap, break resistance in the south. But strategy on paper is one thing. Urban siege is another. Because cities do not fall quietly. They collapse slowly, under pressure, under scarcity, under fear. And inside Mariupol, civilians were still there. Next, the encirclement begins. It did not collapse in one strike. It tightened. Late February, advance from multiple directions: northern axis, eastern axis, southern coastal pressure. Within days, Mariupol was increasingly isolated, bridges damaged, rail lines disrupted, power stations hit, electricity flickered, then failed. Water stopped running, heating systems shut down. Communication went dark. This is what modern siege warfare looks like. Not medieval walls, but infrastructure paralysis. Apartment blocks became shelters. Basements became lifelines. Cellars became hospitals. As artillery exchanges intensified, entire districts were reduced to skeletal concrete. Streets filled with debris. Movement became dangerous, sometimes impossible. Supply shortages followed quickly. Food distribution broke down. Medical facilities overwhelmed. Fuel reserves dwindled. Humanitarian corridors were proposed. Some functioned, some failed. Evacuations moved in waves, fragile, negotiated, unpredictable. For those who left, uncertainty awaited. For those who stayed, survival became daily calculation. Meanwhile, Ukrainian defensive units regrouped around key strongholds, and one name began to dominate global coverage: Azovstal, a steel plant built in the Soviet era, engineered with underground tunnels, reinforced bunkers, industrial labyrinths. It was never designed as a fortress, but it became one. As the siege tightened across the city, resistance consolidated there. What remained of organized defense concentrated inside the steel complex. By April, Mariupol, as a functioning city, had largely ceased to exist. What remained was a shrinking pocket of resistance and a growing humanitarian crisis. The battle was no longer about maneuver, it was about endurance. Next, the final phase: Azovstal, negotiations, surrender, and the fall of the city. By April 2022, Mariupol was no longer a city in motion. It was a battlefield in fragments. And at its center stood Azovstal, a vast industrial complex, kilometers of tunnels, reinforced underground chambers, thick concrete, steel, depth. What was once an economic engine became the last organized defensive position inside the city. Above ground, relentless bombardment. Below ground, a shrinking pocket of fighters and civilians. Estimates varied, information was contested. But what was clear, Azovstal became the final symbol of resistance in Mariupol. Negotiations intensified. Humanitarian corridors were coordinated to evacuate civilians from the plant. International organizations monitored transfers. Evacuations occurred in stages. The optics mattered. Because by this point, Mariupol was no longer just a tactical objective. It had become global narrative. After weeks of encirclement, with supply lines exhausted and infrastructure destroyed, the remaining defenders inside Azovstal eventually surrendered. With that, organized resistance in Mariupol effectively ended. The city changed control. Strategically, the implications were immediate. A continuous land bridge to Crimea was secured. Control over the Sea of Azov consolidated. Southern logistics simplified, but the military outcome was only one layer. The deeper question remained: what was left of the city? Because winning a siege is one thing. Rebuilding what survives, it is another. Next, civilian toll, casualties, displacement, and the human cost. Wars are mapped in arrows, but they are measured in people. Before the siege, Mariupol's population was estimated at over 400,000. By the end of the battle, that number had dramatically shifted. Tens of thousands evacuated, many displaced across regions. Others crossed into neighboring territories. Some never left. Casualty figures remain heavily debated. Different authorities released different estimates. Independent verification proved difficult due to access limitations during and after the siege. What is not debated is the scale of destruction. Residential districts flattened, hospitals damaged, schools reduced to rubble, critical infrastructure shattered. Urban warfare compresses civilians into impossible choices: stay and risk bombardment, move and risk crossfire, wait for corridors that may or may not hold. Humanitarian efforts operated under extreme constraints. Food distribution improvised, medical treatment improvised, shelter improvised. Siege conditions create secondary crises: water contamination, medical shortages, psychological trauma. Even after active combat ended, the civilian story did not. Displacement reshaped demographics. Property ownership became complex. Reconstruction raised legal and political questions. Who returns? Who rebuilds? Who governs? Because when a city changes control after prolonged siege, the battlefield ends, but the social consequences begin. Mariupol was no longer under artillery fire, but it was far from stable. Next, reconstruction, political consolidation, and the new reality on the ground. When the guns fell silent, another phase began. Not military, administrative. Reconstruction efforts were launched in stages. Debris removal first, utility restoration next, housing projects announced soon after. Satellite imagery showed rapid construction in selected districts. New apartment blocks rising where ruins once stood, road networks repaired, public facilities reopened. Official messaging emphasized normalization. Schools functioning, hospitals operating, transport routes reconnected. But rebuilding a city after siege is never only about concrete, it is about control. Administrative systems were restructured, documentation processes altered, property claims reviewed under new authority. Demographic shifts became visible. Some former residents did not return, others relocated from different regions. Population balance changed, and here, geopolitics re-enters the frame. Mariupol is no longer just a damaged city. It is part of a larger strategic corridor along the Sea of Azov. Its port access matters. Its coastline matters. Its position in relation to Crimea matters. Reconstruction serves multiple purposes: stability, legitimacy, integration. Infrastructure becomes signal. Every rebuilt apartment block communicates permanence. Every reopened institution signals administrative consolidation. Internationally, reactions remain divided. Some view reconstruction as restoration of daily life. Others view it through the lens of occupation and unresolved sovereignty. Mariupol today exists in that tension. Physically rebuilding, politically contested. The city stands. But its status in the broader conflict remains part of an ongoing geopolitical equation. Next, the long-term impact. Did Mariupol change the trajectory of the war? Mariupol was not just a siege, it was a turning point. When the city changed control, the southern map stabilized in a new configuration. A continuous land corridor linked mainland Russia to Crimea. The Sea of Azov effectively became internally controlled waters. Logistical pressure in the south decreased. Strategically, that mattered. It reduced vulnerability. It simplified supply chains. It reshaped operational planning across the southern front. But the cost was immense. Urban devastation on a massive scale, civilian displacement, deep international polarization. Mariupol became more than geography. It became narrative. For some, proof of endurance. For others, proof of destruction. And narratives in modern war are strategic assets. The city today stands rebuilt in parts, scarred in others. Construction cranes replace artillery smoke. New facades replace shattered glass. Yet beneath the surface lies an unresolved question. Is Mariupol a closed chapter? Or a frozen line in a conflict still evolving? Because wars do not end when cities fall. They evolve. Mariupol changed the military balance in the south. It altered diplomatic calculations. It redefined coastal control. And it demonstrated something else. In modern warfare, cities are not just objectives. They are leverage. They are symbols. They are long-term geopolitical stakes. Mariupol did not end the war, but it reshaped it. And its story, siege, collapse, surrender, reconstruction, remains one of the most defining case studies of this conflict. This is not about slogans, it is about consequences. And Mariupol's consequences are still unfolding. History is complex, war is layered. Mariupol means different things to different people. What matters here is understanding, not slogans. Stay analytical, stay critical, stay informed. Share your perspective in the comments, respectfully, because informed discussion is more powerful than noise. TRX Update.